The rain fell hard against the cracked sidewalks of Brookdale that night. Streetlights flickered, painting long, eerie shadows on the pavement. Maria Johnson, a woman in her early 30s, limped slowly along the road, her worn-out coat clinging to her as she tried to make a home. She wasn't drunk. She wasn't causing trouble. But the limp in her leg made her look different, vulnerable. To the wrong eyes, she seemed like an easy target. And unfortunately for Maria, the wrong eyes belonged to two patrolling officers that night. Their cruiser slowed as it pulled beside her. The window rolled down, and one of the cops leaned out. "Hey, lady," he sneered, "you lose your cane somewhere?" The other laughed. "Or maybe she's practicing for the zombie walk." Maria's cheeks burned with humiliation. She clutched her coat tighter and kept walking, trying not to react. But the screech of tires told her they weren't done. Within moments, the two officers were in front of her, stepping out of the car with mocking smirks. "What's in the bag?" one demanded. "Just groceries," Maria whispered. "Groceries, huh?" The taller cop snatched it and dumped its contents onto the wet ground. Apples rolled into the gutter, bread soaked in puddles. Maria's limp made it hard for her to stoop down and gather her things quickly. The cops laughed louder. Look at her crawl. Pathetic. Then came the final insult. They slapped handcuffs on her wrists. "Disturbing the peace," they said. No one stood up for her. No one questioned their cruelty. That night, Maria sat in a cold cell, her wrists sore, her pride shattered. But what no one knew, what even those mocking officers couldn't have imagined, was that the woman they ridiculed would walk into court the very next day, not as a criminal, not as a victim, but as the one who would command the entire room. Because Maria Johnson was more than just a limping woman in a shabby coat. She was Judge Johnson, and tomorrow justice would be served. Maria Johnson's limp wasn't just an accident of fate. It was a scar from her past. Years ago, she had survived a car crash caused by a drunk driver. The wreck shattered her leg, ending her dreams of running marathons, but it didn't break her spirit. Still, the limp made her a target. People underestimated her. They saw weakness where there was resilience. Even as she worked her way through law school, classmates whispered that she'd never survive a courtroom. But Maria had always carried one belief deep inside her. Justice is for everyone. Her late father, a war veteran, used to say, "A courtroom isn't about who looks strongest. It's about who stands for the truth." Those words became her compass. That night in the cell, as she sat bruised by humiliation, Maria remembered those words again. She closed her eyes, inhaled slowly, and whispered, "Tomorrow they'll see me." At sunrise, the same officers who mocked Maria the night before strutted into the courthouse. For them, it was just another day. Paperwork, hearings, and maybe more laughs at the expense of people who couldn't fight back. But when the bailiff called the courtroom to order, the officers froze. The woman walking to the judge's bench was no stranger. It was her, the limping woman they had arrested. Gasps filled the room as Maria, dressed in her black robe, took her seat with dignity. The gavel struck once, echoing like thunder. "This court is now in session," Judge Johnson said firmly. The officers' smug grins evaporated. They exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale. The courtroom had just shifted power completely. As fate would have it, the case on the docket that morning wasn't just routine paperwork. It was a review hearing involving misconduct complaints against local police. And sitting before her, almost trembling now, were the same officers who had mocked and cuffed her. Maria's eyes were calm but piercing as she looked over her glasses at them. "Officer Daniels." "Officer Green," she said, voice steady. "We meet again." The gallery whispered. Reporters scribbled. The officers swallowed hard. Maria could have lashed out. She could have embarrassed them the way they had embarrassed her. But instead, she did what a true judge does. She let the law speak louder than revenge. "This court will hear the complaints thoroughly," she announced. "And every voice, no matter how small, will be heard." The very dignity they denied her the night before was now the standard she upheld. News of the dramatic reversal spread quickly. People filled the gallery. Law students, reporters, even ordinary citizens curious about the case. Cameras weren't allowed, but word of mouth painted a vivid picture. The limping woman the cops mocked was the very judge presiding over their hearing. The atmosphere was electric. Some whispered with admiration. She didn't yell. She didn't even gloat. Others murmured. That's true power, quiet, commanding, undeniable. The officers, once smug, now sat stiffly in their uniforms. Every sound of the gavel seemed to hammer at their pride. Maria kept her tone professional, asking sharp, precise questions. Each word reminded them they had judged a book by its cover, and the cover had turned out to be a law they couldn't outrun. As testimony continued, Maria's mind couldn't help but flicker back to the night before. She remembered the humiliation of being pushed into the back seat of the police car. She remembered one officer sneering, "Careful, Grandma, don't trip over your cane." It had stung, not because of her limp, but because of the arrogance with which they dismissed her humanity. Now, seeing them squirm under questioning, Maria realized something profound. She wasn't here just for herself. She represented every person ever mocked, doubted, or mistreated because they didn't look the part. Justice was a revenge. It was a mirror. And today, she was holding it up to them. One officer stumbled over his testimony. His voice cracked. The gallery leaned forward. Maria remained still, her gaze steady. "Officer," she said softly, "do you remember mocking a woman you arrested last night? Calling her names?" The courtroom went silent. The officer's face turned crimson. He looked down, mumbling, "Yes, Your Honor." Maria let the silence stretch, not as punishment, but as a lesson. Finally, she replied, "Do you understand that dignity is not yours to give or take? It is the right of every citizen." The officer nodded, shame weighing heavily. For the first time, Maria saw not arrogance, but regret, and that was enough. The gallery buzzed after Maria's pointed question. Students scribbled notes furiously. Some even wiped tears from their eyes. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was a lesson in humanity. One young intern whispered to another, "I came here to watch a trial. I think I just saw a masterclass in dignity." Maria noticed the effect. She knew the world was watching even if cameras weren't in the room. What mattered now was making sure this moment didn't end with embarrassment, but with transformation. During a recess, Maria sat in her chambers alone. For a moment, the weight of the night before caught up with her. She rubbed her leg, feeling the old ache from an injury that had never fully healed. Her mind returned to her late mentor, a judge who once told her, "Never forget where you came from. Justice is not robes and gavels. It's remembering the pain you've endured and refusing to pass it on." Maria smiled faintly. That advice had carried her here. Today, it mattered more than ever. Back in session, the tone had changed. The officers no longer carried smugness in their shoulders. They answered questions quietly, without sarcasm. The gallery sat in reverent silence. Maria addressed them not as enemies, but as men who had lost sight of their duty. You swore to serve and protect. Protecting includes protecting dignity. Serving includes serving with respect. If you forget that, you forget the badge itself. Her words sank deep, not one head lifted. At the end of testimony, Maria didn't raise her voice. She didn't punish with harsh sentences. Instead, she delivered something heavier. Truth. "This court does not seek to humiliate you," she said, eyes steady. "It seeks to remind you, law is not power. Law is responsibility. And every person, limping, crawling, or running, deserves it." She paused and added, "Yesterday you mocked a citizen. Today, you were humbled. Remember this moment, not for your shame, but for your growth." The gavel fell. The case was adjourned. But the lesson echoed louder than any sentence. News spread like wildfire. Articles headlined, "Limping woman mocked by police revealed," as judge presiding over their case. But the focus wasn't on the officer's downfall. It was on Maria's composure. Social media overflowed with comments like, "She could have crushed them, but she chose to teach them. This is the kind of leadership we need." Maria became a symbol not of revenge, but of resilience. Weeks later, word reached Maria that the officers had changed. They volunteered in community programs, attended empathy training, and spoke to young recruits about the importance of humility. One officer even sent a letter. "Your Honor, I cannot undo my words, but I can change my actions. Thank you for giving me that chance." Maria read it quietly, her heart heavy, but proud. The next morning, Maria walked to the same courthouse door she had entered as a humiliated woman only days before. But now, she wasn't just a judge, she was a symbol. The whispers that once mocked her limp now carried reverence. Strangers greeted her warmly. Law students followed her rulings closely. And officers remember her words before every shift. Standing before the bench, Maria looked out over the courtroom and thought, "They laughed at my limp, but today they rise for my gavel." Her story became a living reminder. Dignity can't be mocked out of someone. It can only shine brighter when tested.